Okay, good morning, guys. Today you're going to take a few notes since we didn't get to the Lincoln assassination information yesterday, just on kind of quick information as to kind of what happened to him and what was his legacy. And then you're going to read a chapter in the textbook on kind of the beginning of Reconstruction so we can start to talk about that tomorrow. All right. So, in terms of like when and where this happened, it's kind of interesting and important to the story of Reconstruction. Lincoln's assassination happened 5 days after the surrender of the South to the North at Appomattox Courthouse. So it was within the same week that the war ended, April 14th, 1865. The anniversary is coming up soon. So he was assassinated at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. All right, so the person who was responsible for his death was John Wilkes Booth. Just a little information about him. He was an actor, a former actor who was familiar with the theater and comfortable with the theater that Lincoln was assassinated in. And he was not a military soldier in the war. He was just someone who kind of sympathized with Southern politics. And then during the war, instead of fighting, he was someone who had uh, contributed to the war effort by smuggling medical supplies out of the North and then bringing them down to the South. So this is actually where Lincoln was killed. It was in one of those booths to the side, kind of the dignitary seating. They were currently watching the play Our American Cousin. As I said, Booth was an actor. He was familiar with the play. He knew there was a part where one character in particular got a big laugh, so he waited for that to occur, and then he shot him during the kind of loud audience reaction at that point. So when he killed him, he yelled the Virginia motto at the time, Sic Semper Tyrannis, which is a Latin phrase meaning death to tyrants. So he yelled Sic Semper Tyrannis, the South is avenged, um, shot Lincoln in the head from behind, and then jumped from that balcony or that booth down onto the stage, breaking his leg when that occurred. So they quickly carried Lincoln across the street to a boarding house. They actually took a door from the theater and laid him down on it and carried him across the street, where they tried to take care of him. But at the time, the medical capabilities that people had was just not enough to operate and get that bullet that was lodged behind his right eye. So he ended up dying on, as I said, April 15th. There were actually, what they found out after the fact was that it was actually a pretty large conspiracy, and the plan had been to kill multiple people, not just Lincoln. So they were, Booth and his accomplices were also planning on killing Vice President Johnson. One of them went to the vice president's house, knocked on the door, and then kind of chickened out. And then they were also supposed to kill the Secretary of State, Seward. So there were rewards put forth after the assassination for information, and they ended up capturing and executing four of them and then putting four others in prison. So, what we're going to look at for the rest of this week is kind of the impact. So, we really were left at the end of the war without a leader. We had Vice President Johnson, who we're going to talk about in a second, who was not particularly um, I'd say the right person for Reconstruction, whereas Lincoln was much more of that kind of like big figure, that refounding father. Um, Johnson was a little bit more prickly and difficult to get along with. So the assassination by someone who, said he was avenging the South kind of opened up that wound between the North and South even more. So he was officially the first president assassinated. We've had several others since then. So after Lincoln, we had James Garfield, who was assassinated within the first couple of months of his time in office. William McKinley, who we'll talk about later, president during the Spanish-American War. And then we went about 60 years or so before having another president assassinated until John F. Kennedy. So the president that we ended up with was, as I said, Vice President Andrew Johnson, who was a Southern senator and the only one who remained loyal to the Union during the Civil War. He was a prickly personality, like I said, someone who had uh, been taught to read by his wife. He was illiterate. and then educated himself and became a lawyer and eventually a politician. He is our first president ever to get impeached, which we will talk about tomorrow. So just a very different person than Abraham Lincoln. So the last thing I just wanted to show you really quickly is some of the things that you can see if you go to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the museum. They actually have an exhibit there where they have, you know, saved all of the things that Lincoln was wearing, the door that they carried him on, all of the things in his pocket. And that is a great theater if you've never been to it, or not theater, museum if you've ever been to it before, because they have an entire exhibit when you walk in devoted to Ipswich with a large house that one of those first period houses that we have here. They took all the way down to DC and then rebuilt it inside the Smithsonian Museum. So it's kind of cool. All right, so the other thing you're going to do if you look in classroom is going to be a chapter on Reconstruction, so you can kind of begin to see what it is that we're going to be talking about for the end of this unit. All right, so that is it, and we will see you guys tomorrow.